Welcome back. This is Chicken Philosophy, The Secret of the Golden Flower, Part 33, in which I will pick up right where Edward left off in Part 32. And I'm feeling somewhat hopeful about today's reading, on account of I got the distinct impression last time that Carl Jung is done talking about his whole, for now, his whole anima, animus thing. And he's getting into some subtler stuff. So that's nice. Well, today's beverage is comes in a cup that is this actually is the 8 auspicious symbols. Longtime viewers might remember I have a different cup that has 4 auspicious symbols repeated twice. But this is all 8. Let's put up the 8 auspicious symbols. Alright, so in no particular order, I just wish me luck. This is like spiritual purity. This is good speech. This is unity. I don't know. Umbrella. Keep everybody together. This is the guy in Bhaktapur, that I talked to that one time. Definitions. The endless knot of endless love. The fish of happiness, the good signs. It's like when someone's exhibiting good signs, and as opposed to bad ones. And then the 2 that aren't coming to mind right now. So there's a divination in itself. Editor Edward, which 2 did I forget, and how do you interpret that? That'd be the jar of prosperity and the wheel of the Dharma. As for interpretation, I don't know. It's interesting. Seems to me Dharma has a lot of definitions, but in the most general sense, I think that it's your vocation, your mission, your goal, your purpose in life, and walking it, walking the way, as it were. Prosperity, in this case, it's a jar full of water, which means you're not going to die of thirst. You're going to be able to water your plants because you have some water set aside in a jar. Back in the old days, that meant wealth. It's not full of gold. It's not full of ones and zeros in a digital bank account somewhere. But anyway, yeah, I don't know how to interpret that. In the Bible, you'd say like, thou canst not serve both God and money, or mammon, whatever, and that's God and money, kind of. Dharma, God. It's not exactly 1-to-1, but ballpark. And prosperity, water, mammon. Don't know if you could really call water mammon. I think Gwydion made a very good point in the previous episode on Martin Luther, where water is universally good. It's good to have it. It's not so good when you run out. All right. Well, there's a lesson that we can all, and by we all, I mean me, take with us and learn something. All right. So that's enough for the beverage. Oh, it's Assam tea. Assam is one state in India that I haven't been to, unless there's time travel involved. In other words, I've been to Meghalaya, and Meghalaya is right next to Assam, and they used to be one state called Assam. So I've kind of been to Assam, but not really. Okay. So that's the beverage. As for the incense, let's go and visit our new Hall of Incense. Om Mani, Om Mani, Padme Hum. our more or less randomly selected. I did that. That was my project yesterday. Actually, yesterday and the day before. Finding a place. Wow, so crisp. Finding a place for. So this is Magnolia. Finding a place for everything that was on those tables, those like cabinets or whatever in the hallway, and arranging all my incense on top instead, so that they're on display. They're nicely arranged and easy to access. Because the problem was they were all shoved in some cabinets, and so like it just wasn't pleasant. So it's nice now. Now we can look at all the incense, decide which ones. But I didn't want to waste all that time. I didn't want to waste too much time being too picky, so I just grabbed one of those prepackaged ones. And clearly this is unopened as well. So I've smelled Magnolia before, but I don't think I've smelled this brand of Magnolia before. And the scissors aren't conveniently located, so we're going to go with some good old-fashioned ripping in order to get at these incenses. Oh, and it already smells nice. Yeah, these are nice. Okay, all right. So today's incense is Magnolia. Yeah, all right, okay. Yeah. Assam and Magnolia. That's our theme for a couple of the senses that aren't being recorded by the phone. So you can hear me, you can see me, you can smell me, and you can taste me. Drink, never mind. The point is, I don't mean me like me the ape, but me the video. Never mind. Okay, I think this is a good time to transition into the next part of our show. Oh, and I was very naughty. It only lasted one round of. In other words, we decided to do 2 CP for every 1 BB. We did that once. Now this is the 3rd CP in a row. So, oh well. Never mind. So next we do the I Ching, and that has become very simple because the cards, or the hexagrams we have not put up on the screen yet, are all here in one place. Editor Edward, if you wouldn't mind turning up the music. Thank you, Editor Edward. Normally we do that for when I'm actually putting it up. Okay, so this is broken solid, triple broken solid. All right, now, Editor Edward, if you wouldn't mind, once again, as before, turning up the music a bit while I look that one up. Water on the bottom, mountain on the top. Figure 4. Okay, so the problem is I remember getting this one before. We'll go ahead and use it, but something happened. I'll have to do some investigation. Maybe one of them was upside down, or maybe I'll figure it out between now and Secret of the Golden Flower Part 34. All right, it's Meng, M-E-N-G, or youthful folly. Even the foolish can attain wisdom by modestly following the sage. All right, sure, that is familiar because we have gotten that one before, and put that very much stack of ones we've gotten before, so we won't get it again, as far as I can tell. And I'll go ahead and get to the reading, shall I? Yes, I shall. Okay, looks like this is where we left off. Oh, okay, well, I thought he wasn't going to be annoying, but he's already being annoying. Okay, so the last line we left off with that derailed the whole episode and Edward could no longer continue was, "There is no use in our mimicking Eastern sensibility, for nothing would be more childish than to wish to aestheticize a psychic condition such as this." Okay, well, there was a lot to break down in that, so we spent the last 8 minutes of the previous episode riffing off that one sentence. So now we will continue from there. "This detachment is something I am familiar with in my practice." We know about your practice. If you don't know about his practice, check out the black books here on Chicken Philosophy, and then come back to this, or whatever you want to do. "It is the therapeutic effect par excellence for which I labor with my students and patients. That is the dissolution of participation mystique." Editor Edward, could you give us a little bit of insight? Is there anything other than, it's a thing Carl Jung said in his commentary of Sigurd the Golden Flower, that you can let us know about participation mystique? Hang in there. Carl's going to explain in the next sentence. Thank you, Editor Edward. Okay. "With a stroke of genius, Levi Brohl has established participation mystique." All right. Never mind, Editor Edward. I'm sure you were able to let everyone know to just hang in there, and all right, I'll just keep going. "As being the hallmark of primitive mentality. As described by him, it is simply the indefinitely large remnant of non-differentiation between subject and object, still so great among primitives that it cannot fail to strike European man." Are those the two types of humans, Carl? "Identified as he is with the conscious standpoint." So European, conscious. Primitive, unconscious. All right, Carl. I mean, we'll overlook the fact that it is 1930, 1931 as you're writing this. And in post-1940, 1945, pretty much everyone in the world has got a clear idea of this. This is an appropriate way to perceive humanity and Europe and its relationship with the rest of the world. And this is some garbage that needs to be set on fire again and again and again, apparently, because it keeps growing back. Whew! Anyway, got a match, got a light. What was I saying? Yeah, okay. "Insofar as the difference between subject and object does not become conscious, unconscious identity prevails." I mean, this is kind of interesting. So you walk down the street, you see a piano fall from an apartment complex and land on a fire hydrant, and there is some primitive part of you, not the conscious part of you. If somebody came up and said, "Sir, did that piano have anything to do with you?" You'd say, "No, officer, I did not set that up with some kind of candle under the rope 5 minutes ago. I had nothing to do with it." But there is a primitive part of you that is like, what does it mean for me? What is the message for me? I mean, like that, a lot of us, like to play with that. Like, it's 11:11. Why did I look at the clock at 11:11? At exactly that time. Synchronicity, man, And it's like, yeah, that's kind of the divide he's talking about. Like, that as a European, you should think nothing of it and be like, it's just a coincidence. After all, there are 3,600 minutes. not that many minutes. There's 60 times 24. The point is, yeah. All right, whatever. But this seems like one of those things where he's gonna some kind of. Oh, it's the printer because the electricity came back on. I was wondering what kind of noises the neighbors were making. Continuing, insofar as the difference between subject and object does not become conscious, unconscious identity prevails. And that goes for, like, if you're in an environment, if you're surrounded by people who are stressed out, who are focused on one particular subject. You go to Trader Joe's, they're talking about that fucking election. You can't get away from it. It's absorbed, it's in your blood, it's in your bones. The only thing that you can do at times is to get away. What does that mean? Change your surroundings, change your environment. Go out to Joshua Tree, go up to the crest, go somewhere where you're surrounded by nature. Go somewhere where you're surrounded by, culty yoga practitioners. Whatever works for you. Go to the monastery. Go to the Zen. Go to church. Go to the environment. That sound that echoes off the walls of those big old stone churches. We all know that sound. The stained glass, if you don't have too much trauma attached to the church, it can be a very nice place to go, especially if you're in a city and you want to get away from whatever's going on outside. The point is, yeah, there is part of us that looks at what's around us and sees a reflection of what's within us. That's like, I like to create my office here. There's that thing I read, Fama Fraternitatis, years ago on Esoteric Nerd podcast, and it didn't occur to me until I had read the whole thing and heard the whole thing at least 2-3 times that it's basically about the great mystery of a guy's office. Like they found his secret place where he kept all of his mementos from his travels and all of his books that he thought were important, and that kind of thing, and pieced together his life story based on the vault, the original vault of the Adepti. Unless you count the seven-sided tomb of Osiranophorus. But anyway, what's the point? The point is your environment. You create your environment, or if you create your environment, you can create an environment that will have a bouncy back and forthy effect, as they say in science, where you can make yourself feel better by cleaning your room, basically. Thank you, Jordan Peterson. Okay. Insofar as the difference between we read that already. The unconscious is then projected into the object, and the object is introduced into the subject. That is psychologized. Oh, write it down. There's your word to use today. Plants and animals then behave like men. Men are at the same time themselves, and animals also. And everything is alive with ghosts and gods. Naturally, civilized man regards himself as immeasurably above these things, yes. Instead, he is identified with his parents throughout his life. Yeah, it's a better idea to be identified with the cat in the corner, the crystal ball over there, the shit on the desk, the leaves outside. Yeah, at least some of that. So that you're not just walking around going, how do I compare to my father? I have my mother and me, yeah, those things are nice, but man, it can be a very narrow path to walk. Or he is identified with his affects and prejudices. Yeah, many people are. And then you know which peer group you fit with and which ones to block on social media, which ones to march with. And shamelessly accuses others of the things he will not see in himself. Right. It's that whole Jungian thing where you project your shadow. In a word, he is afflicted with a remnant of primal unconsciousness. Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, that's true. Or non-differentiation between subject and object. By virtue of this unconsciousness, he is held in thrall by countless people, things, and circumstances. That is, unconditionally influenced. His mind, nearly as much as the primitives, Carl, is full of disturbing contents, and he uses just as many apotropaic charms. Editor Edward, could you remind us, apotropaic?
Supposedly having the power to avert evil influences or bad luck.
Thank you, Editor Edward. I knew it was something like that, but He no longer works the magic with medicine bags. Some of them do. Amulets and animal sacrifices, but with nerve remedies, neuroses, progress, in quotes, the cult of the will, and so forth. Let's go back and talk a little more about this cult of the will. You got a pamphlet, a brochure you can give me? I can see if this is the cult for me. The cult of the will. How do you say will in Greek? Oh. But if the unconscious can be recognized as a co-determining quantity, along with the conscious, and if we can live in such a way that conscious and unconscious or instinctive demands are given recognition as far as possible, the center of gravity of the total personality shifts its position. I like that. All right. I think sometimes we tend to think of that there's an executive officer, the neocortex, right in the very front is the boss, and sometimes the boss is like a little bit wishy-washy or asleep, and then the other parts of the brain start to like, well, let's take us over here. And it's, well, that's good. You got to get enough coffee and then wake up and, okay, everybody, no, we're going to exercise today, or whatever it is. I think that can work, but maybe isn't a good rule 100% of the time. And it can't be 100% of the time because we go to sleep, right? But yeah, the center, I like that idea. The center of the gravity shifts when we give validity. I mean, his words were a little different than the ones I'm using. But if we acknowledge the existence, first of all, and give some value to our unconscious perspective, our right brain, our feminine side, you might say. I wouldn't, but you might, especially if you're in 1930. No. What's my point? Yeah, then your sense of personal identity ends up not like, how the sun, like when all the planets are on one side, then the center of the solar system is actually not in the sun. I mean, like, it's never like the exact center of the sun. I mean, if so, it's for a fraction of a second and a wild coincidence, once in a while, if all the planets are perfectly balanced around the sun. But when they're all on one side, then the sun and the planets are all orbiting the same point in space that's not the sun. So I think in this example, if we carry the metaphor forward until it falls apart and proves itself entirely useless, the sun could be thought of as the conscious mind, and all the other planets could be thought of as the rest of the consciousness, or the unconscious, or the semi-conscious, or the subconscious, or the whatever you'd like. And if we say, well, the sun's the important one, the others are just there. They're like cabinet members. They're just advisors, and the sun can just ignore them and do its own thing. The sun is the center. It's a fixed point. And then we pretend the sun is a fixed point. And, I mean, In space you can pretend. I mean, if we pretend that the world, that I am actually the only fixed point in the universe, then that would necessitate, that the Earth holds still and the entire universe, orbits once per day around and is doing some other kind of funkiness gradually on different timescales within itself that is entirely orbiting around not just this planet but me specifically. That's like the obvious way that things appear, but then what am I talking about? Am I saying anything? Was that going anywhere? Was it gonna arrive at anything? I don't think so. So I'm just gonna keep reading. Okay, where were we? Carl. All right. Yeah, I liked that. The center of gravity shifts its position. It ceases to be in the ego, which is merely the center of consciousness, and instead is located in a hypothetical point between the conscious and the unconscious, which might be called the self. Now, I have a complaint. To humanity and the English language. If that chief executive officer in the front of the neocortex, that when it wakes up, it can have full authority to direct, though it may not be able to deal with some of the subtleties and complexities of things going on in the emotional and subconscious. But that entity that says, okay, stop what you're doing. We're gonna do this today. This is what we're gonna do now. It's been 2 days. We're gonna record an episode of Chicken Philosophy while there's still a little bit of red light. It's not as cool as it would have been if we had done it an hour ago, but there's still. The point is, that's the ego. The front, the guy in the front that says, "Okay, everybody, okay," because when they talk about ego, like the ego getting hurt or the ego getting bruised or whatever, that feels like much more of an emotional, like subtle thing that is kind of out of one's control. It seems to be two different mechanisms: the chief executive officer of the brain versus the one who takes it personally and gets wounded. Seems to me that the one that says, no, it's my way or the highway, I have to be right, otherwise, it's the end of the world for me, or, I think too much of myself, I think too little of myself. Those parts of the self feel much more emotional to me, where the one that's directing the you know what I mean? Yeah, the conscious self, he's calling synonymous with the ego. So he's got the I, he's got the self, he's got the soul, he's got the conscious self, and all these different things and all these different assumptions that sometimes it's hard to follow what he's saying because I can't get behind his assumptions. But anyway, no, it's fine. It's minor things. The self might be called the self or the ego or the I, but let me talk about a time when myself, my ego, my I, and my soul were all having a conversation, and then we're all on different pages. And here's a mandala to explain the difference between them all. See, the self is the whole thing. The I is in the middle. Carl. Anyway, if such a transposition succeeds, it results in doing away with participation mystique. How? What? How? Okay, all right. I'll keep reading, but you're not making much sense. And a personality develops that suffers only in the lower stories, so to speak, but in the upper stories is singularly detached from painful as well as joyful events. I don't know, Carl, you lost me a little bit. Participation mystique being, if that is when the person, let's say, the being, identifies himself with, or his or herself with what's going on around him or herself, sees that as me somehow, then if I give value an acknowledgement to the subtler parts of conscious, unconscious, semi-conscious, whatnot, in addition to the conscious ego self, I guess, in this brand new cosmology that is unrelated to anything else you've ever said before, Carl. How does that do away with participation mystique? I don't follow. Maybe by becoming aware of okay, the lower stories and the higher stories. Okay, so if we say, well, yeah, part of me, all right. So part of me feels like, like when I go to New Delhi and there's a lot of honking and grayness and concrete and lots of people and stuff. It's a different feeling than here in Goa when there's a lot of tropical trees and beaches and stuff like that. Different in the office than it is in the parking lot. Different when it's hot than when it's cold. I mean, yeah, my mood completely changes when it's raining and the temperature is nice versus hot. But he's saying that there'll be stories when you acknowledge the conscious and the unconscious both and give them both value and let the center of gravity of the self hover in between them. Then you have the stories of the building, the higher ones, of course, that are more European, and the ones down below that are more primitive. That checks out with 1930 assumptions in Europe. No, what? Yeah, weird, fuzzy, fucked up metaphors, but yeah, I get it, but why? Let's move on to the next paragraph and see if that set up some other point he's going to make. The creation and birth of this superior personality, oh goody, Ubermensch, is what is meant by our text when it speaks of the holy fruit. Oh, is it now? Okay. The diamond body. You keep your hands off the diamond body, Mr. Jung. Jesus Christ, you're going to shit all over Vajrayana too. Or refers in other ways to an indestructible body. These expressions are psychologically symbolical of an attitude which is out of reach of intense emotional involvement and therefore safe from absolute shock. They symbolize a consciousness detached from the world. I have reasons for believing that this sets in after the middle of life and is actually a natural preparation for death. To the psyche, death is just as important as birth, and, like it, is an integral part of life. What happens to the detached consciousness in the end is a question the psychologist cannot be expected to answer. It's like that whole, hey, I'm the manager of the severed floor. Desmond, what are you watching? Severin? Whatever theoretical, but it's not his jurisdiction. What goes on out there is your job, not mine, says the conscious psychiatrist, European, or whatever. Whatever theoretical position he assumed, he would hopelessly overstep the boundaries set him by science. That which is measurable, observable, and repeatable, and generally accepted as consensus by the people who all circulate those papers amongst each other. That's the boundaries, right? Don't go too far outside of that. Right? Is it? He can only point out that the views of our text with respect to the timelessness of the detached consciousness are in harmony with the religious thought of all times, and with the thought of the overwhelming majority of mankind. A person thinking differently would stand outside the human order in some way, and therefore would be suffering from a disturbed psychic equilibrium. Says you, Mr. Jung, I'm water, you're glue. What, you describe me to fucking you too, asshole. No, I'm just kidding. Just processing. Sometimes Jung makes me process things. All right. Thus, as a physician, I make a great effort to fortify the belief in immortality as far as I can, especially in my older patients, for whom such questions are crucial. That's fair. That's fair. I tend to take a different approach where a full acceptance of not knowing and an acceptance, well, what if it's this? Okay. Well, what if it's this? Okay. And, oh, well, that makes me feel disturbed. Okay, why do you feel disturbed? Because I'm holding on to this. Stop holding on to that. Oh, okay. So it's fine, right? Yeah. If it's that, it's fine? Yeah. If it's that, it's fine? Yeah. All right. Cool. Instead of like, it's immortal. No, I'm not going to cease to exist. Fuck you, atheist. You know, like I tend to think of that as, operating within a two-pole unnecessary thing. But whatever. It's personal preference, I guess. All right. If viewed correctly, in the psychological sense, death is not an end, but a goal. Is that the correct way to view it? And therefore, life towards death begins as soon as the meridian is passed. Carl, are you okay, buddy? Life's a journey, not a destination. If it were a destination, then what you just said would be correct. As soon as you reach middle age, then the goal of life is to die. Okay, buddy, why are you the psychologist writing to us? The Chinese philosophy of yoga. Sidebar. Yoga is an ancient Sanskrit word which means unity and refers to... The only place in the entire earth where you find the words Chinese and yoga put together like this is in Carl Jung's commentary, not in the text itself. Carl Jung's commentary on the text. All right. Continuing. The Chinese philosophy of yoga is based upon the fact of this instinctive preparation for death as a goal, and following the analogy with the goal of the first half of life, namely begetting and reproduction. Oh yeah, don't forget to have babies while you're committing to your gender norm in your culture. Carl, sometimes it's difficult to get to the good ideas when you keep repeating the shitty ones of your time. Maybe someone will say the same thing about me in 100 years. Probably not. What? Yeah, the means toward perpetuation of physical life. Yeah. Got to perpetuate the physical life. It takes as the purpose of spiritual existence the symbolic begetting and bringing to birth of a psychic spirit body, parentheses, quote, subtle body, end quote, end parentheses, which ensures the continuity of the detached consciousness. It is pneumatic. Remind us, Editor Edward, what is pneumatic? The pneumatic man. There doesn't seem to be anything specifically about pneumatic, PNEU, that is, matic man, other than like some kind of anime character or video game character popped up with that name. But here in Merriam-Webster's dictionary, definition number 1, of or relating to or using gas, such as air or wind, moved or worked by air pressure. And then that's 1A, and then 1B is 1, adapted for holding or inflated with compressed air, 2, having air-filled cavities, and then bigger 2, definition 2, of or relating to the pneuma, and then it says spiritual in all caps.
Definition 3, having a well-proportioned feminine figure, especially having a full bust. So, unless, basically, I'm pretty sure it's the second definition is the reference being made, unless Carl Jung is creating the astral form of his anima to be a vessel through which he navigates the afterlife. In which case, at least the original description of her when she first appeared, if I'm not mistaken, she was the innkeeper's daughter, and she was blonde in medieval Europe. So perhaps definitions 2 and 3 both.
There's another interesting thing that I missed somehow when I was Googling as Editor Edward of half an hour ago or whenever that was. In Gnosticism, according to Wikipedia, spiritual, the pneumatics, quote, spiritual, obviously the second of those 3 definitions, were in Gnosticism the highest order of humans, the other 2 orders being psychics and helix, or matter. A pneumatic saw themselves as escaping the doom of the material world via the transcendent knowledge of Sophia's divine spark. From inner revelation coming from the highest point of the subtle nous in the head or crown region. And then there's a reference being made to Irenaeus. So, interesting. Perhaps Carl Jung is very consciously, because we know he got into Gnosticism at one point, very consciously making a reference to this higher order of mankind that has a spiritual body and escape destruction and Sophia's divine spark. But his source would have been before the Nag Hammadi was uncovered. He's quoting, or he's making reference to Irenaeus. So I don't know, it's still an open question for me. What is Gnosticism, and how much of the Nag Hammadi is Gnosticism, and how many different separate things tend to be lumped together in people's mind and called Gnosticism, sort of slapdash, like an Asian fusion restaurant combining, Hawaiian and Korean and pho and sushi and, kind of like the equivalent of that. In other words, is it possible that generally people are taking a whole bunch of different things and slapping them all together and calling them Gnosticism when the only thing they all have in common is that they're not orthodoxy? But that's another question for another program here on Chicken Philosophy. But yeah, anyway, I just thought I'd let you know about this extra layer of possible meaning to pneumatic with a P-N.
Thank you, Editor Edward. Known to the European from antiquity, which he, however, seeks to be... Where do you draw the line, Carl? Where's the boundary between? Never mind. We're outside. They're primitives. The Greeks called them. People who don't they speak another language, so they sound like bar. So they're the barbarians. Barbarians. They're not Greek, so they're uncivilized. Okay. Just like that, eh? The pneumatic man known to the European from antiquity, which he, however, seeks to produce by quite other symbols and magical practices, by faith and a Christian way of life. Here again we stand on a foundation quite different from that of the East. Again, the text sounds as though it were not very far from Christian ascetic morality, but nothing could be more mistaken than to assume that it is actually dealing with the same thing. It's dealing with the same thing, Carl. All right, moving on. I disagree. There we go. Back of our text is a culture thousands of years old, which has built organically upon primitive instincts and which therefore knows nothing, Jon Snow, of the arbitrary morality violating the instincts characteristic of us as recently civilized Teutonic barbarians. Oh, okay, all right. I kind of feel at least that phrase. Recently civilized Teutonic barbarians. Yeah, that's true. Teutonic, of course, is like Germanic. Edward, my name, is Teutonic for Rich Guardian. For this reason, the Chinese are without that impulse toward violent repression of the instincts which hysterically exaggerates and poisons our spirituality. Just give it a couple decades and then check back with those 1.5 billion people, and you might have different observations. But also, it's 1.5 billion people, so it's kind of ridiculous and absurd to get one text from 400 years ago and generalize about the culture in present day of 1 billion people that any idea of heroic the man who lives his instincts can also detach from them. Okay. And in just as natural a way as he lived them. Okay. Any idea of heroic self-conquest would be entirely foreign to the sense of our text, but that is what it certainly would amount to if we followed the Chinese instructions literally. Heroic self-conquest, like the spiritual jihad or something. Yeah, these non-European concepts are too far beyond the primitive European sensibility for us to be able to comprehend. I don't know. Carl is a weird one. He's talking about the difference between us Europeans and those primitives is that we're shit and they're more enlightened. And it's like, Carl, it's like some kind of problematic BDSM mind game, We must never forget our historical premises. Oh, shut up with your historical premises. Only a little more than 1,000 years ago, we stumbled from the crudest beginnings of polytheism into the midst of a highly developed Oriental religion, meaning from Judea, from Israel, right? Palestine, which lifted the imaginative minds of half-savages to a height that did not correspond to their degree of spiritual development. Interesting perspective, Carl. I don't know. The more I read of Carl Jung, the more I realize that I used to make reference to him as if he were a like mind to myself, but fewer and fewer things in common I'm noticing. All right, continuing. In order to, I enjoy, again, it's like I enjoy some aspects of it, but a lot of the assumptions, again, it's 100 years old, so it's kind of, why is it easier to understand and it's easier to read things that are 2,000 years old than it is things that are 100 years old? In order to maintain this height in some fashion or other, the instinctual sphere inevitably had to be repressed to a great extent. Thus, religious practice and morality took on a markedly violent, almost malicious character. The repressed elements... So, Christianity was too civilized for us pagan, barbarian Europeans, and so we pagan European barbarians made Christianity violent. All right. Yeah, I suppose that's not that much different from the Martin Luther kind of, not him himself, I haven't heard him say it, but I've heard Protestants talk about the influence of Satan, of course. And people in the church, too. People in the Roman Catholic Church will talk about the influence of Satan in the church. That it's the insidious, the devil hates that the church exists because it's the presence of Christ in the world, and so he does everything he can to get into the hearts of priests and and people. So if the Pope does something bad, that's Satan trying to destroy God's holy church on earth. And then if 100,000 priests molest people, oh, that's the influence of Satan trying to destroy God's one true, holy, and Catholic Church that I'll believe in forever. You know, Carl Jung has a slightly different way of explaining away the evils within the institution of Christianity than they do. Okay. To grow up like what? Yeah. All right. I don't know. The repressed elements naturally do not develop, but vegetate further in their original barbarism in the unconscious. We would like to scale the heights of philosophical religion, but are in fact incapable of it. To grow up to it is the most we can hope for. The Amfortas wound and the Faustian split in the Germanic man are not yet healed. Editor Edward, could you give us some insight about the Amfortas wound and the Faustian split?
Amfortas was in that play Percival, remember? I don't know if it's... I think it was in the Black Books. Carl was making reference to it, and we did a sort of deep dive. Not a deep dive, but a Wikipedia dive. So he had the wound that Percival was able to heal by touching it with the holy spear. And the Faustian split is another way of saying the Faustian bargain, referring to an agreement or arrangement that provides advantages but also carries significant moral costs or disadvantages, often involving a compromise of one's values or principles.
Thank you, Editor Edward. His unconscious is still loaded with those contents which must first become conscious before he can be liberated from them. Recently, I received a letter from a former patient with pictures which pictures the necessary transformation in simple but pertinent words. She writes, quote, "Out of evil much good has come to me. By keeping quiet, repressing nothing, remaining attentive, and by accepting reality, taking things as they are and not as I wanted them to be, by doing all this, unusual knowledge has come to me, and unusual powers as well, such as I never could have imagined before. I always thought that when we accepted things, they overpowered us in some way or other. This turns out not to be true at all. And it is only by accepting them that one can assume an attitude toward them." A dissolution of participation mystique is the footnote. "So now I intend to play the game of life, being receptive to whatever comes to me, good and bad, sun and shadow, that are forever alternating, and in this way also accepting my own nature with its positive and negative sides. Thus everything becomes more alive to me. What a fool I was! How I tried to force everything to go according to the way I thought it ought to." End quote. Wow, that was a really good quote from a former patient. Was it Miss Molzer or Miss Wolf or someone else? Only on the basis of such an attitude, which renounces none of the values won in the course of Christian development, but which, on the contrary, tries with Christian charity and forbearance to accept even the humblest things in oneself. I mean, okay, I'm going to go ahead and close. I need a little sticky thing. So, yeah, all right, it's interesting. It is interesting. Sometimes frustrating if I let go of, like when I was a child, and people do this, like when I got the Cliff Notes version from my parents. I guess that's what it is I always this is participation mystique, isn't it? I associated myself with what I considered to be like the cool and interesting aspects of my parents and my grandfather, and part of that was Jungian perspective psychology practice, or whatever. And so part of what you see, what you observe me going through is a process of being like, what? I thought you were cool. I thought, I defended you. I spoke for you. I recommended you. I kissed your ass. I blew smoke up your ass for so many decades. And this is the shit you've been saying all along. Sitting on my bookshelf. This book was sitting on my bookshelf, unread. I read the first few pages, and sometimes I'd open to the middle, and if I saw him say something stupid, I'd just pretend I didn't see it and just go on with my day. But now, confronting it, reading out loud, on record, and seeing a lot of this stuff that he's writing, I'm like, wow. There's probably some subset of human thinking that Carl and I are both in, oriented toward, or in the same category. But then there's I guess the narcissism of small differences, where the way he's laying it all out just kind of makes me go. Plus, there was the decades of being surrounded by people who were all working Golden Dawn stuff, but then they're bringing in their assumptions, and and there was a time when there was sort of an ideal, this idealistic time where I would have a semi productive conversation with somebody who was a Republican, who was a Marine, and it was pro preemptive strike on Saddam Hussein, and I was a hippie who was against it, and we'd have a conversation where it felt we understood where the other was coming from, but neither of us changed our position, but we were able to find a third thing that was unrelated, that well, in the higher realms, of course, these things down below are whatever, I don't know. So I don't know, I've had a lot of these kinds of experiences, but yeah, it's interesting, confusing, a little disorienting how Carl, part of it is I think related to who he thinks is going to be reading this, because he's saying Christianity good, European civilized, but primitive human more civilized. European is just a Germanic, barbarian savage, that the only good thing about him is that someone converted him to Christianity, and he's going through his process of, I should stop being an ape and be more Christian. Well, meanwhile, the Chinese primitives, it's like, I'm not even sure what exactly how to define the thing that's irritating me, or why it's irritating me. But maybe you've noticed too, but I can't help noticing that I've been a little bit irritable, and I have to wonder if it's me, or if it's the weather, or if it's the content of what I've been reading. From my perspective, maybe because of the fantastic mystique or whatever, it seems to me that it's what I've been reading. But then whenever I come back around to Meccan Revelation, I guess I enter a space where it's sort of we all know we're talking about fiction. It's really nice and beautiful poetry and about the personal relationship with God and contemplating the But then mixed in there is stuff that's so unfamiliar and so obviously 1,000 years old that I can just look at the camera and go, 1,000 years old stuff. And then we move on, where if it's 100 years old, it's fresh, it's familiar. There's people today, probably this morning on YouTube, I clicked "Don't recommend this channel" on channels that had titles that were straight out of this what we just read today. You know what I mean? So it's I feel more compelled to address it, but I'm not even sure what I'm addressing. But then when I hear it later, I watch it later, I edit it later, and I go, oh, yeah, I was going down that way, but I was totally missing this. For example, yesterday, 3 days ago, when we read Martin Luther, or when Gwydion read Martin Luther, he totally glossed over the fact that Martin Luther was saying that when you pray, don't forget to remain silent, and if good thoughts come to you, then pay attention to them, because that's the Holy Spirit talking to you. And as Dan Carlin put it,
Luther doesn't just say you can read the Bible for yourself. He says you can interpret it for yourself. He says, listen, there's no reason to believe that God has stopped talking to people, so it's possible that you could actually, have the Holy Spirit talk to you. Think about what that does, though.
Yeah. So that was Dan Carlin's Hardcore History, an episode called Prophets of Doom, that he's got behind a paywall, unfortunately. But anyway, I'll put a link to it in the description below if you don't mind putting your credit card information in to pay for $2 download or $4, whatever it is. It's worth it. It's like 4.5 hours of him talking about. Martin Luther is just sort of the setup for the scene. Basically, one of the many unforeseen results of Martin Luther saying basically that very thing. Like, he's saying, hey, listen, the Holy Spirit can come to you. And it's not that he was saying anything new. A lot of the saints were like, when I pray, I just hear this overwhelming voice. But I think it had to be pretty intense. If it was a genuine thing. For the cases in which it was genuine, they were having an extreme, schizophrenic episode, to be like, I was praying and I heard this voice and I saw this heart and it said, put me in the house of kings, and whatever it is. But Martin Luther was inviting everybody to have that experience. Like every German farmer or whoever that read his words or heard his words, he's saying, hey, don't forget when you pray to listen, because you might hear a little voice telling you, you are the prophet of the apocalypse. You must get everybody together and set them on fire. And you've got to give that importance and write it down and go out and found that new religion, go for it. He didn't mean to say that, but that's what the thing he said ended up saying, what people heard when he spoke that. And so that's fun, fun little quirk of history, and why there's so many varieties of really weird Protestants that all were founded by some prophetic person was partly because Martin Luther gave that advice. And yeah, Gwydion just glossed over it. He was focused on other things he was upset about that day. So hopefully, I don't know, we'll be done with this soon, and we're getting toward the end. And after this, we're going to read Tao Te Ching, which will definitely have a different vibe to it. And, I don't know. I feel like I should apologize or something for the episode, but I won't. This is what I'm putting out today. This is my process. It's not always pleasant, and thank you for going along the ride with me along with it. Hopefully it complements or doesn't, inhibit or overcomplicate or taint your process or your perspective on things too much. Having heard mine, my incomplete, off the cuff perspective. On that page and a half of what we just read. Anyway, well, there it is. Gonna take a couple days, and then we'll be back Sunday or Monday. And so, I hope that you have a wonderful weekend. And all right. Until next time.